I stood in the emergency room at 3 in the morning, covered in blood and debris, when my phone rang. My 16-year-old daughter Madison was sobbing on the other end. "Mom, they won't let me in. Grandma said there's no room and shut the door. I'm sitting on their porch in the rain. The tornado had destroyed half our town just 12 hours ago. Id sent Madison to my parents' house for safety, while I stayed to help as the only trauma surgeon for miles. I never imagined my own family would abandon her." The phone slipped from my blood-stained hands and clattered to the floor. Around me, the chaos of the emergency room continued, but everything felt suddenly muted. Nurses rushed past with IV bags, the heart monitor beeped frantically from bed 3, and somewhere behind me, Dr. Patricia Ross was calling out orders for another incoming trauma patient, but all I could hear was my daughter's voice, broken and scared, telling me that my own parents had left her standing in the rain. 12 hours earlier, the tornado sirens had begun wailing across Millbrook, Kansas. I was finishing my evening rounds at Millbrook General when the first reports came in. An EF4 tornado, nearly half a mile wide, was bearing down on our small town of 8,000 people. The hospital immediately went into disaster protocol. As the only trauma surgeon within 60 miles, I knew I couldn't leave. Madison had been at her friend Sarah's house when the sirens started. I called her immediately, my heart racing as I watched the storm clouds gathering outside the hospital windows. "Honey, you need to get to Grandma and Grandpa's house right now," I told her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Take Highway 12 south to Springfield. It's only 45 minutes, and you'll be safe there." My parents lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Springfield, a town that rarely saw severe weather. Harold and Janet Whitman had raised 3 children in that house, and it had always been our safe haven during storms. When I was Madison's age, we'd driven there during tornado warnings, and my mother would make hot chocolate while we waited for the all-clear. "But Mom, what about you?" Madison had asked, her voice tight with worry. "I have to stay here, sweetheart. People are going to need help tonight. Grandma and Grandpa are expecting you. I already called them." That was a lie. I hadn't called them. Id tried twice, but the lines were busy. I figured I'd call once Madison was safely on the road. My parents loved Madison fiercely, and I knew they'd welcome her with open arms. The tornado hit Millbrook at 9:23 that night. I watched from the hospital's reinforced basement as the monster storm tore through our downtown, ripping apart buildings that had stood for over a century. The old Carnegie Library was gone. Murphy's Diner, where Id had my first date in high school, was nothing but twisted metal. Entire neighborhoods were simply erased. The casualties started arriving at 9:45. A family of 4 trapped in their collapsed basement. An elderly man with a punctured lung from flying debris. A pregnant woman in premature labor after a tree fell on her car. For 6 straight hours I worked without stopping, my hands steady despite the chaos around me. This was what Id trained for, what Id devoted my life to. Saving lives was my calling, and I was the only person in a 60-mile radius who could perform the surgeries these people desperately needed. Madison texted me at 11:30. "Made it to Grandma's safe. Love you, Mom." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I prepped for another emergency surgery. But now, at 3 in the morning, everything had changed. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and immediately called my parents' house. The phone rang 4 times before my mother's voice answered, cold and distant. "Hello, Frida." "Mom," Madison said you wouldn't let her in. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine. She's sitting on the porch." "Sitting on the porch?" "Mom, it's 3 in the morning and it's raining." "Why isn't she inside?" There was a long pause. "We simply don't have room, Frida. Your sister Carol and her 3 children are here." My blood ran cold. Carol, my 34-year-old sister, had been going through a messy divorce for the past 2 years. I knew she'd been struggling, but I had no idea she was staying at my parents' house. "Mom, your house has 4 bedrooms. There's always room for Madison. Carol's children are in the guest rooms. There's nowhere for Madison to sleep. She's your granddaughter. She can sleep on the couch, in your room, anywhere. She's just a child and she's scared. Your sister and her children need stability right now. Madison has you. They don't have anyone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, I'm at the hospital. I can't leave. There are 23 tornado victims here, and I'm the only surgeon." That's your choice, Frida. You always choose your work over family. The line went silent, and I realized my mother had hung up on me. I stood there in the hallway, still wearing my surgical scrubs, trying to process what had just happened. My parents, who had raised me to believe that family always came first, had just turned away their own granddaughter during a crisis. I called Madison back immediately. She answered on the first ring. Mom! Honey, I'm so sorry. I'm going to fix this right now. Grandma won't even look at me. She just said there's no room and shut the door. Aunt Carol was standing behind her with a glass of wine, and she just shrugged and said, Your mom should have called first. Then they both just walked away. My hands clenched into fists. Carol had been watching while my daughter stood in the rain, and she'd done nothing. Worse than nothing, she'd been casual about it, dismissive. Madison, I want you to drive to Dr. Ross' house. You remember where she lives, right? On Maple Street. Yes, but Mom, it's so late. She's expecting you, honey. I'm calling her right now. I hung up and immediately dialed Patricia Ross, my colleague and friend. Patricia answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. Freda? What's wrong? Patricia, I need a huge favor. My parents just turned Madison away, and I can't leave the hospital. Can she stay with you tonight? Of course. What do you mean they turned her away? It's a long story. I'll explain later. Madison's driving to your house now. Don't worry about it. Emma will be thrilled to have a sleepover partner. Well, take good care of her. As I hung up, I felt a surge of gratitude for Patricia, followed immediately by a wave of anger so intense it made my hands shake. My own sister had stood there with a glass of wine, watching my frightened daughter get turned away, and had made a joke about it. This wasn't just thoughtlessness. This was something much worse. I worked through the night, my hands steady as I operated, but my mind raced with questions. By 7 a.m, I had performed 6 emergency surgeries and stabilized 8 more patients. The immediate crisis was over, and other doctors from neighboring towns had finally arrived to help. I stepped outside into the dawn light and called Carol directly. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. Hello, Frida. Carol. What the hell happened last night? Good morning to you too, sister. Her tone was lazy, unbothered. Don't you dare take that attitude with me. Madison is 16 years old, and you left her sitting in the rain. Mom and Dad are getting old, Frida. They can't handle another teenager running around the house. My kids are already a handful. Another teenager? Carol. Madison doesn't live there. She needed 1 night of shelter during a tornado emergency. Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to play hero at the hospital. The casual cruelty in her voice took my breath away. Play hero? Carol. I'm a trauma surgeon. 23 people needed emergency surgery last night. People died. And that's very noble of you, I'm sure. But your daughter isn't my responsibility. She's your niece. She's also the daughter of someone who makes more money in a month than most people see in a year. You can afford to solve your own problems. Something clicked in my mind. How long have you been living at Mom and Dad's house? There was a pause. What do you mean? It's a simple question, Carol. How long? We're just staying here temporarily while I get back on my feet after the divorce. How long? 8 months, if you must know. But it's not permanent. 8 months. My sister had been living rent-free in my parents' house for 8 months, and it had no idea. Are you paying rent? Carol laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Rent? Frida, I'm unemployed. I'm a single mother of 3 children. Mom and Dad understand that family helps family. What have you been telling them about me? What do you mean? Mom acted like she barely knew me last night. She said I always choose work over family. She's never said anything like that to me before. Maybe she's just finally seeing the truth. What truth, Carol? That you think you're better than the rest of us. You, with your medical degree and your big house and your important job. You never call, you never visit. You send Christmas cards like we're distant relatives. My mouth fell open. I call Mom every Sunday. I visit every other month. I sent birthday gifts for the kids in April. When was the last time you called? 3 weeks ago. Funny. Mom doesn't remember that conversation. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe your version of events isn't the same as everyone else's version. I thought about my mother's cold voice, the way she'd spoken to me like I was a stranger. Carol, have you been intercepting my calls? Don't be ridiculous. Have you been telling Mom and Dad that I don't call? I don't need to tell them anything. They can see for themselves how often you bother to check in. But something in her voice had changed, become defensive. You have been, haven't you? You've been telling them I don't care about them. Frida, you're being paranoid. Just because you feel guilty about neglecting your family doesn't mean there's some conspiracy against you. Neglecting my family? Carol, I'm the one who paid for Dad's heart surgery 3 years ago. I'm the one who drove Mom to every chemotherapy appointment when she had breast cancer. I'm the one who's been sending money every month to help with their expenses. There was silence on the other end of the line. Carol, look, Frida, you make a lot of money. You can afford to help. Some of us aren't so fortunate. What does that have to do with anything? It means that maybe you should be paying for your own problems instead of expecting everyone else to drop everything for you. My hands were shaking again. My own problems? Carol, my daughter needed a place to stay during a tornado. That's not a problem that money can solve. That's family. Your daughter has everything she could ever want. My children have been through hell with the divorce. They need stability and love right now. And Madison doesn't. Madison has a mother who can afford to take care of her. The line went dead. Carol had hung up on me, just like my mother had. I stood in the hospital parking lot, looking out at the destruction the tornado had left behind, and realized that my family had been destroyed too. Somehow, while I wasn't paying attention, my sister had poisoned my relationship with my parents, turning them against me with lies and manipulation. I thought about the way my mother had spoken to me, like I was a burden, like I was selfish for asking them to help Madison. That wasn't the woman who had raised me. That wasn't the grandmother who had taken Madison to Disney World for her 10th birthday and called her my special girl. Carol had been working on them for 8 months, living in their house, filling their heads with lies about me. And I'd been so busy saving other people's lives that I hadn't noticed my own family falling apart. I called Patricia to check on Madison. She's fine, Patricia assured me. She's sleeping in Emma's room. But Frida, she's really hurt. She keeps asking what she did wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. This is all on my sister and my parents. What are you going to do? I looked at the destroyed buildings around me, thinking about how we'd rebuild this town stronger than before. I'm going to find out exactly what Carol has been telling them. And then, I'm going to fix this. Be careful, Frida. Family drama can be more destructive than any tornado. She was right. But I'd spent my entire career putting people back together after disasters. I could do the same for my family. I just had to figure out how much damage Carol had really done. After 36 hours of continuous work at the hospital, I finally felt safe leaving the emergency room in the hands of the trauma team that had arrived from Wichita. I drove to Patricia's house first to check on Madison. She was sitting at the kitchen table with Emma, picking at a plate of pancakes, her eyes red from crying. Mom! She jumped up and hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Why don't Grandma and Grandpa want me around? I held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against my chest. It's complicated, honey. There are things going on that have nothing to do with you. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. Frida, I need to talk to you. We stepped into the living room while Madison stayed with Emma. I'm furious, Patricia said quietly. Emma told me what Madison said last night. Your sister was standing there with a glass of wine, watching a 16-year-old girl get turned away in the rain, and she made a joke about it? What kind of person does that? The kind of person who's been manipulating my parents for 8 months. What are you going to do? I'm going to drive over there and confront them. I need to understand what Carol has been telling them. Want me to come with you? I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. The drive to my parents' house in Springfield felt like the longest 45 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about all the Sunday phone calls over the past 8 months, how my mother's voice had gradually become cooler, more distant, how my father had stopped asking about my work. I'd attributed it to stress from Carol's divorce, never imagining that Carol was actively working to turn them against me. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was Carol's 3 children playing in the front yard with expensive new toys. 7-year-old Luke was riding a brand new bicycle that must have cost $300. 5-year-old Sophie had a tablet in her hands, and 3-year-old Danny was playing with a remote control car. These weren't the toys of a family struggling financially. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. My mother answered, her face set in hard lines. Freda, hi Mom, can we talk? She stepped aside reluctantly, and I followed her into the living room. The house looked different somehow. The furniture was the same, but everything felt worn down, neglected. The carpet needed vacuuming, and there were children's toys scattered everywhere. My father was sitting in his recliner, watching television. He glanced up when I walked in but didn't smile. Dad. Freda. His voice was neutral, polite, like I was a stranger. Where's Carol? She took the older kids to the store, my mother said. She'll be back later. I sat down on the couch, the same couch where I'd done my homework as a teenager, where Madison had learned to read, where we'd gathered every Christmas morning to open presents. Now it felt like enemy territory. I want to understand what happened last night. My mother sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. Madison is your responsibility, not ours. Mom, she's your granddaughter. She was scared and needed help. Your sister's children need help too. They've been through enough upheaval. How long has Carol been telling you that I don't care about this family? My parents exchanged a glance. What do you mean? My father asked. Carol told me this morning that you both think I never call, never visit, never check in. But that's not true, and you know it. When was the last time you called? My mother asked. 3 weeks ago. We talked for 45 minutes. You told me about Dad's doctor's appointment, and I told you about Madison's soccer tournament. My mother frowned. I don't remember that conversation. Mom, I call you every Sunday. I have for years. No, you don't. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my call history. Look, Hare's last Sunday at 2:30 in the afternoon. The Sunday before that at 1:15? The Sunday before that at 3 o'clock? My mother stared at the phone screen, confused. I don't understand. Carol always answers the phone on Sundays. She says you never call. The pieces clicked into place. Carol's been intercepting my calls. That's ridiculous, my father said. Why would she do that? Dad, look at my call history. I've called this house 63 times in the past 8 months. How many times have you actually spoken to me? He thought for a moment. Maybe 6 or 7 times. Carol's been answering the phone and telling you I haven't called. And she's been telling me that you're busy or not home. My parents looked at each other, and I saw doubt creeping into their eyes. What about the birthday cards? My mother asked. You haven't sent birthday cards in over a year. I sent cards for everyone's birthday in April. I sent money for the kids' school supplies in August. I sent a check for $500 for Dad's medication last month. We never got any of those things, my father said. My heart sank. Carol's been intercepting the mail too. Now you're being paranoid, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Mom, you raised me to believe that family always comes first. You taught me that we take care of each other no matter what. Last night, you turned away your own granddaughter during a crisis. Does that sound like the woman who raised me? She looked down at her hands, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. We're struggling, Freda, my father said quietly. More than you know. What do you mean? Money's been tight since I retired. Your mother's medical bills from the cancer, the house repairs, helping Carol and the kids. We're barely keeping our heads above water. I leaned forward. Dad, I've been sending money every month. No, you haven't. I have. $500. Direct deposit into your checking account. My father's face went pale. That money. Carol said that was from her part-time job. The room went silent. We all understood what that meant. How much money has Carol told you she's contributing? I asked. $300 a month, my mother whispered. Dad, can I see your bank statements? He hesitated, then got up and walked to his desk in the corner. He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. I opened it and scanned the deposits. There was my $500 every month, listed as an electronic transfer. But there were also cash withdrawals, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, always in amounts of $100 or $200. Who's been making these cash withdrawals? Carol, my father admitted. She said she needed money for gas and groceries for the kids. I added up the withdrawals in my head. She's been taking out $800 to $1,000 a month. She said she'd pay it back when she gets a job, my mother said. How long has she been looking for work? 8 months. I closed the folder and looked at my parents. These people I loved so much, and saw how exhausted they were. Carol had been systematically isolating them from me while draining their finances. Shed convinced them that I didn't care while she stole the money I'd been sending to help them. "Where are your credit card statements?" I asked. My father's face crumpled. "Frida, we're in trouble." He walked to the kitchen and returned with a stack of bills. "Credit card statements? Past due notices? Final warnings?" I flipped through them, my horror growing with each page. "Dad, you owe $63,000 in credit card debt. We've been taking cash advances to help Carol and the kids. She said it was temporary." At the bottom of the stack was a notice that made my blood run cold. A foreclosure warning. The bank was going to take their house in 30 days. "Did you know about this?" I asked, holding up the notice. Carol said she was handling it. She said Shed worked out a payment plan with the bank. I looked at the date on the notice. It was 2 weeks old. Carol had been sitting on this information while my parents lived in ignorance of how close they were to losing everything. She hadn't just been stealing from them. She'd been setting them up for financial ruin while turning them against the one person who could help them. And in 2 weeks, when the foreclosure went through, Shed probably disappear with whatever money she could grab, leaving my parents homeless and me to pick up the pieces. But Carol had made one critical mistake. Shed turned away Madison. Shed hurt my daughter, and that changed everything. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to make sure she faced consequences for every lie Shed told and every dollar Shed stolen. I drove back to the hospital with my mind racing, but not with panic. With cold, calculated fury. Carol thought she was smart, but Shed gotten sloppy. Shed left a paper trail, and Shed hurt the wrong person. I'd spent years as a surgeon, learning to think clearly under pressure, to see problems from every angle and find solutions. This was just another kind of surgery, and Carol was the cancer I needed to remove. Back at the hospital, I found a quiet corner in the doctor's lounge and made my first call to attorney Michael Bradley, someone I'd worked with on medical malpractice cases. "Michael, I need help with a family matter. Financial elder abuse. How serious are we talking? 63,000 in credit card debt, stolen mail, intercepted phone calls, and a foreclosure notice that's being hidden from the victims. Jesus, Frida. How long has this been going on? 8 months. Maybe longer. Do you have documentation?" "I have bank statements showing cash withdrawals, credit card statements, and the foreclosure notice. I can get phone records and postal records if needed. This is criminal, not just civil. You need to contact Adult Protective Services and possibly the police. I want to build an airtight case first. Can you help me gather evidence legally?" "Absolutely. But Frida, if your parents are in immediate danger of losing their home, we need to move fast." After hanging up with Michael, I called my bank and requested detailed records of every electronic transfer ID made to my parents' account for the past year. Then I contacted the phone company and requested records showing all incoming and outgoing calls to my parents' house. My next call was to Dr. Sandra Mitchell, a psychiatrist who specialized in family dynamics and manipulation. I'd referred patients to her before, and I trusted her expertise. "Sandra, I need a consultation about a family member who's been systematically isolating elderly parents from their adult children while financially exploiting them. That's classic predatory behavior. The isolation is key because it prevents the victims from getting outside perspective on what's happening to them. How do they usually get caught? When they get greedy or careless. Often they'll make a mistake that exposes the whole pattern. What's the best way to handle the confrontation? Don't confront the perpetrator directly. They're usually skilled manipulators and will just create more confusion. Instead, focus on reconnecting with the victims and letting the evidence speak for itself." I spent the next 2 days quietly gathering information. The phone records were devastating. Carol had answered 93% of my calls over the past 8 months, and the average length of those calls was 37 seconds. Just long enough for her to tell me that my parents weren't available, and to take a message that she never delivered. The postal investigation was even more damning. I contacted the post office and learned that Carol had filed a change of address form, redirecting mail addressed to me at my parents' house to a post office box that she controlled. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, checks I'd sent for my father's medication, all had been redirected to her. Michael helped me contact Adult Protective Services and file a formal complaint. The caseworker, Jennifer Walsh, was appalled when she saw the evidence. "This is one of the most systematic cases of financial abuse I've seen," she said. "Your sister has been running a long-term con on your parents. What happens next?" "Well, open an investigation. But it takes time. In the meantime, you need to protect your parents' remaining assets. The foreclosure notice gives us 30 days. Then we need to move faster." I'd been thinking about that foreclosure notice, and something didn't make sense. I drove back to my parents' house and found my father in his workshop, tinkering with an old radio. "Dad, can I ask you something about the house?" "Sure, honey." Had been warmer to me since our conversation about the bank statements. "How much do you still owe on the mortgage?" "We paid it off 6 years ago." My blood chilled. "Then why is the bank foreclosing?" "Carol said we needed to take out a new mortgage to pay for my heart surgery and your mother's cancer treatments." "Dad, I paid for those medical bills, remember? I took out a loan against my own house." His face went white. "She said insurance didn't cover everything. She said we needed $40,000. How much did you borrow against the house?" $60,000. "Carol said we needed extra for home improvements and to help her get back on her feet." I felt sick. Carol hadn't just been stealing their monthly income. She'd convinced them to mortgage their paid-off house, and then stolen that money too. She'd put them in a position where they'd lose their home, and she'd done it deliberately. "Dad, where's Carol now?" "She took the kids to Kansas City for the weekend. Said she had job interviews." "Job interviews on the weekend?" "Sure." I had a different theory about where Carol had gone. I called Michael immediately. "She's liquidating. I think she's planning to disappear." "What makes you think that?" "She convinced them to mortgage a paid-off house 8 months ago. She's been draining their accounts systematically. And now, she's taken the kids out of town, right before the foreclosure. If she's planning to run, we need to freeze her access to any remaining funds immediately." "Can we do that? If Adult Protective Services files an emergency petition?" "Yes. But we need evidence that she's about to flee." I thought about the expensive toys I'd seen the kids playing with, the casual way Carol had dismissed Madison's crisis, the fact that she'd been sitting on the foreclosure notice for 2 weeks without telling my parents. "Michael, what if I told you, I think she's been planning this all along? What if the whole point was to get them to mortgage the house so she could steal that money? That would make it premeditated fraud, much more serious charges. Then let's prove it." That evening, I sat down with my parents and told them everything I'd discovered. The intercepted calls and mail, the stolen money, the fact that I'd been paying for their medical bills, not them. I showed them the phone records, the postal investigation, the bank transfers they'd never known about. My mother cried. My father sat in stunned silence. "She's our daughter too," my mother whispered. "How could she do this to us?" "Because she's sick, Mom. And she's been planning this for a long time." "What do we do now?" "We stop her. And we make sure she can't hurt anyone else." The next morning, Jennifer Walsh from Adult Protective Services arrived with the emergency petition. We froze all the accounts that Carol had access to. We changed the locks on the house. And we waited. Carol returned from Kansas City that afternoon to find her credit cards declined at the gas station. She called my parents' house, furious and panicked. "Dad, my cards aren't working. There must be some mistake." But my father was ready for her now. "There's no mistake, Carol. We know what you've been doing." "I don't know what you mean." Frida showed us the phone records. She showed us the mail redirection. "We know you've been stealing from us." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Carol, you have no idea what I've been through. What I've sacrificed for this family." "You've sacrificed nothing. You've been stealing from us while we trusted you." "I'll pay it all back." "With what money? You haven't worked in 2 years." The line went dead. Carol had hung up, just like she'd hung up on me, but this time there was nowhere for her to run. 2 weeks later, exactly as I'd planned, Carol would be the one panicking. 2 weeks later, I was back at work when my phone rang. It was my father, and his voice was shaking. "Freda, you need to come over here. Something's happening with Carol." I arrived at my parents' house to find chaos. Carol was in the living room, screaming at my mother while her 3 children sat on the couch, crying. Her face was red with rage, and she was holding a handful of declined credit cards. "This is all Freda's fault," she was shouting. "She's trying to destroy our family." "Carol, calm down," my father said. "The children are scared. Calm down." "They've frozen all my accounts. How am I supposed to buy groceries? How am I supposed to put gas in my car? I stepped into the room, and Carol whirled around to face me. You bitch! You vindictive, jealous bitch. Watch your language in front of the children, I said calmly. Don't tell me how to raise my children. This is all you're doing. You couldn't stand that Mom and Dad loved us more than you. My mother stood up, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. Carol, that's enough. Freda didn't do this to you. You did it to yourself. What are you talking about? We know about the money, my father said quietly. All of it. Carol's face went pale. What money? The $500 a month that Freda's been sending us for over a year. The money you told us was from your part-time job. I don't know what you're talking about. The cash withdrawals from our account. $800 to $1,000 every month. That was for the children, for food and clothes. The mortgage you convinced us to take out on our paid-off house. Carol's hands started shaking. You needed that money for medical bills. Freda paid for those medical bills, my mother said. You lied to us. The intercepted phone calls, I added. The redirected mail, the birthday cards, and Christmas gifts you stole. I didn't steal anything. I was protecting them from your guilt money. Protecting them from what? From feeling bad about how little you cared about them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the call history. Carol, I called this house 217 times in the past year. You answered the phone 93% of the time and told me they weren't available. Here is a typical conversation. I played a recording I'd made with the phone company's help. Carol's voice came through clearly. Hi, Freda. Mom and Dad are napping. Can I take a message? Oh, and they asked me to tell you not to worry about calling so much. They're fine. Carol's face crumpled as she heard her own voice lying to me. And here's what I told Mom and Dad after each of those calls. I continued, looking at my parents. I told them you were too busy to talk. I told them you had more important things to do. I told them you said to stop bothering you. My mother gasped. You've been lying to all of us. For 8 months, I said. Systematically isolating us from each other while you stole their money and destroyed their financial security. Carol looked around the room, seeing that her web of lies had finally collapsed. I was desperate. After the divorce, I had nothing. No money, no job, 3 kids to feed. So you decided to steal from your elderly parents, I said. I was going to pay it all back. With what? You haven't looked for a job once in 8 months. You don't understand what it's like to have nothing while your sister has everything. I worked for everything I have. I went to medical school. I built a practice. I earn my money by saving people's lives, and you've never let anyone forget it. That's not true. And you know it. The doorbell rang, interrupting our argument. My father answered it, and a man in a suit stepped inside. Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Morrison from First National Bank. I'm here about the mortgage refinancing documents. Carol's face went white. What documents? Kevin Morrison looked confused. The papers, miss. Carol Whitman signed this morning. The refinancing of the property at this address for $85,000. I didn't sign anything, my father said. According to our records, Miss Whitman has power of attorney and authorization to conduct financial transactions on your behalf. I felt my blood pressure spike. She absolutely does not. Kevin Morrison pulled out a folder and handed my father a set of documents. These were signed this morning at 9:30 a.m. My father stared at the papers, his hands shaking. This isn't my signature. And this isn't mine, my mother added, looking at the document. Carol was backing toward the door. I can explain. You forged their signatures, I said. You tried to refinance their house without their knowledge. The kids need stability. I need money to take care of them. By forging legal documents? Carol, that's fraud. Kevin Morrison was looking uncomfortable. I think I need to call my manager. Actually, I said, I think you need to call the police. Carol made a run for the door, but my father blocked her path. For a 72-year-old man with a heart condition, he moved remarkably quickly. You're not going anywhere until the police get here. Dad, please. Think about the children. I am thinking about the children. They need to see that there are consequences for stealing and lying. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Detective Maria Santos listened calmly as I explained the situation and provided the evidence I'd been gathering. The forged documents, the stolen money, The intercepted communications. This is clearly a pattern of financial elder abuse, Detective Santos said. Miss Whitman, you're under arrest. As the handcuffs clicked around Carol's wrists, she looked at me with pure hatred. You've destroyed your own family. No, Carol, you did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. The children were crying as their mother was led away. I knelt down beside them, my heart breaking for these innocent victims of Carol's choices. It's going to be okay, I told them. Your daddy is coming to get you, and you're going to be safe. Carol's ex-husband Robert arrived an hour later. He looked exhausted and sad but not surprised. I've been expecting this call for months, he told me. She's been stealing from everyone who trusted her. That's why I had to divorce her. The children can stay here tonight if they want, my mother offered. Thank you, but I think they need to come home with me. They've been through enough chaos. As Robert gathered the children's belongings, 7-year-old, Luke looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Is Mommy coming back? I don't know, sweetheart, but you're going to be okay. Your daddy loves you very much. Did we do something wrong? No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and children get hurt. But that's not your fault. After Robert left with the children, I sat with my parents in their living room. The same room where we'd gathered for family dinners and holiday celebrations, the same room where Carol had woven her web of lies for 8 months. I'm so sorry, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. We should have trusted you. She's very good at what she does, Mom. She's had years of practice. How do we fix this? My father asked, gesturing at the stack of bills on the coffee table. We start by stopping the foreclosure, I said. I'll pay off the mortgage tomorrow. Then, well, work on the credit card debt. Frida, you can't afford to pay for all our mistakes. Yes, I can. And more importantly, I want to. That's what families do for each other. My mother reached over and took my hand. How do we make sure this never happens again? We stay in contact, real contact, not through intermediaries. We verify information independently, and we never let anyone isolate us from each other again. As I drove home that night, I thought about the past 2 weeks and how everything had changed. Carol was in jail, facing serious felony charges. My parents' house was safe. The children were with their father, getting the stability they needed. But more importantly, my family was talking again. Really talking, without lies or manipulation standing between us. Justice had been served, but the real work of rebuilding trust was just beginning. 3 days later, I was in court watching Carol face Judge Patricia Morrison for her arraignment. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her confident, manipulative facade. The charges were serious: financial elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and theft. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Miller, laid out the case methodically. Your Honor, the defendant engaged in a systematic pattern of financial abuse against her elderly parents over a period of 8 months. She intercepted communications, redirected mail, forged signatures, and stole approximately $47,000 in cash and benefits. Carol's court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking man named David Chen, tried to paint her as a desperate single mother, but the evidence was overwhelming. The phone records, the forged documents, the redirected mail, the systematic theft. It all pointed to premeditation, not desperation. Bail is set at $50,000, Judge Morrison announced. The defendant is to have no contact with the alleged victims pending trial. Carol turned to look at my parents, who were sitting behind me in the courtroom. Her eyes were pleading, desperate. Mom, Dad, please, I'm your daughter. My father stood up, his voice steady and strong. You stopped being our daughter the day you chose to steal from us and lie to us. Carol's face crumpled, and she was led away in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, Detective Santos filled us in on the rest of the investigation. We found evidence that your sister has been doing this before. Her ex-husband's parents filed a similar complaint in Colorado 2 years ago, but they dropped the charges when she agreed to move away. So this wasn't her first time, I said. Not even close. She's got a pattern going back at least 5 years. Different victims, same methods. My mother looked sick. How did we not see it? Because she's good at what she does, Detective Santos replied. These kinds of predators specifically target people who love and trust them. They use that love as a weapon. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and family healing. Carol's children, Luke, Sophie, and Danny, came to visit my parents regularly. Robert had been honest with them about why their mother was in jail, appropriately explaining that she had taken money that didn't belong to her, and that she needed help to learn not to do that anymore. The children were resilient in the way that only children can be. They missed their mother, but they were thriving in the stable environment their father provided. Luke started doing better in school. Sophie stopped having nightmares. Danny, who was only 3, seemed to bloom with the consistent routine and clear boundaries. They're different kids now, Robert told me one afternoon as we watched them play in my parents' backyard. More relaxed, more trusting. I didn't realize how much Carol's behavior was affecting them. What will you tell them when they ask about her? The truth. That their mother made bad choices and is facing consequences. That they're not responsible for her choices. And that they're loved and safe. Madison, who had been staying with Patricia for the first few weeks after the tornado, was finally able to spend time with her grandparents again. The reunion was emotional for everyone. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," my mother said, holding Madison tightly. "We were confused and hurt, but that's no excuse for turning you away when you needed us." "I thought you didn't love me anymore," Madison whispered. "Oh, honey, we never stopped loving you, we just got lost for a while." My father built a special shelf in Madison's room at their house, displaying all the birthday cards and Christmas gifts that Carol had intercepted. "These have been waiting for you," he told her. "We just didn't know they existed." The financial recovery was more complex but manageable. I paid off the mortgage that Carol had taken out, saving the house from foreclosure. The credit card companies were surprisingly cooperative when presented with evidence of elder abuse, agreeing to reduced payment plans and removing much of the interest that had accumulated. "It's going to take about 2 years to pay off everything," I explained to my parents. "But the house is safe, and you'll have enough money for your monthly expenses." "We can't let you pay for all of this," my father protested. "Dad, I make more money in 2 months than most people make in a year. This doesn't hurt me financially, but it saves your entire future." "What about your own retirement? Madison's college fund?" "Both are fine. I'm not sacrificing anything important. This is what family money should be used for, protecting the people you love." Carol's trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but she ended up pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory financial counseling. At the sentencing hearing, she was allowed to make a statement. She stood at the podium, thinner and frailer than when she'd been arrested, and apologized to my parents. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said, her voice barely audible. "I told myself I was desperate, that I had no choice. But that wasn't true. I had choices, and I made the wrong ones. I hurt the people who loved me most, and I'm sorry." My father stood up in the gallery. "Carol, we forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You need to serve your time and get the help you need. When I get out, can we try to rebuild our relationship?" My mother answered this time. "That depends entirely on whether you're willing to be honest and accountable. If you are, then yes. If you're not, then no." Carol nodded, tears streaming down her face, as she was led away to begin her sentence. After the hearing, Detective Santos pulled me aside. "I wanted you to know that your case has helped us identify at least 3 other similar situations in the county. Your evidence gathering was so thorough that it's become a model for how to investigate these kinds of crimes. I'm glad something good came out of it. You saved your parents' house and probably their lives. Financial abuse of the elderly often leads to severe depression, health problems, even suicide. By acting when you did, you prevented a tragedy." As we left the courthouse, I thought about the children who would grow up without their mother for the next 2 years. I thought about my parents, who would have to live with the knowledge that their own daughter had betrayed them so completely. I thought about the trust that had been broken and the long road ahead to rebuild it. But I also thought about Madison, safe and loved, spending weekends with grandparents who now appreciated how precious family connections really are. I thought about the bills that were being paid, the house that was secure, the future that was stable again. Justice had been served, but more importantly, love had won. The truth had set us all free, even though that freedom came with pain. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Sometimes protecting your family means stopping the person who's hurting them, even when that person is family too. I'd learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just enabling disguised as compassion. Real love sometimes requires saying no, setting limits, and holding people accountable for their choices. Carol would serve her time and hopefully get the help she needed. Her children would grow up knowing that actions have consequences but also that they were loved unconditionally. My parents would live out their retirement years with dignity and security, and I would continue to be the daughter they raised me to be, someone who protects the people she loves, no matter what the cost. 6 months after Carol's sentencing, I stood in my parents' kitchen making Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd re-established as part of our family healing. Madison was at the table helping my mother write thank you cards for the volunteers who had helped rebuild our tornado-damaged town. My father was in the living room, reading to Carol's youngest son Danny, who was visiting for the weekend. The house felt like home again. Not the tense, uncomfortable place it had been during Carol's residence, but the warm, welcoming sanctuary I remembered from childhood. My parents had moved into a comfortable assisted living community in Springfield, but we'd kept the family house for gatherings like this. Mom, remember when Aunt Carol used to make those chocolate chip cookies? Madison asked my mother. I do remember. My mother replied carefully. She made good cookies. Madison nodded thoughtfully. I miss her sometimes. But I don't miss being afraid that she'd answer the phone when I called you. It was a perfectly 13-year-old observation, innocent but insightful. Children have a way of cutting through complex emotions to reach simple truths. It's okay to miss the good parts of someone while also being glad that the bad parts are gone, my mother told her. Do you think she'll be different when she gets out of prison? I hope so, sweetheart. Prison is supposed to help people learn to make better choices. Through the kitchen window, I could see Robert pushing Sophie on the swing set we'd installed in the backyard. Luke was playing fetch with the golden retriever puppy that Robert had gotten the kids once they'd settled into their new routine. The children visited my parents every other weekend, maintaining the family connections that mattered while staying safe from their mother's destructive patterns. Carol had been in prison for 8 months now. She wrote letters to the children regularly, letters that Robert screened carefully before sharing. She was attending counseling sessions and working in the prison library. Her letters spoke of remorse and self-reflection, though Robert and I both remained cautiously skeptical. Time will tell if she's really changing, Robert had said during our last conversation. I want to believe it's possible, for the kids' sake, but I won't put them at risk based on hope alone. My parents had settled beautifully into their assisted living community. They'd made new friends, joined clubs, and discovered activities they'd never had time for when they were busy working and raising children. My father had taken up watercolor painting. My mother was teaching literacy classes to adult learners. We should have done this years ago, my father had told me. We were so afraid of becoming a burden that we stayed isolated in that big house instead of building community with people our own age. The financial situation had stabilized completely. The credit cards were paid off. The house was secure. My parents had enough money to live comfortably, with additional savings for emergencies. More importantly, I'd set up systems to prevent future exploitation. All their accounts required dual signatures for large withdrawals. Their mail went directly to a post office box that only they could access. And we talked every Sunday, no matter what. Madison was thriving. The tornado and family crisis had been traumatic, but she'd emerged stronger and more resilient. She'd started volunteering at the hospital, inspired by watching me work during the emergency. She was planning to study medicine and specialize in trauma surgery. I want to help people the way you helped people that night, she'd told me. When everything was falling apart, you stayed calm and fixed what was broken. Being a doctor isn't just about medical knowledge, it explained. It's about seeing problems clearly and finding solutions even when the situation seems impossible. Like what you did with Aunt Carol. Exactly like that. The tornado recovery had been remarkable to watch. Millbrook was rebuilding stronger than before, with new construction standards and better emergency preparedness. The community had come together in ways that reminded everyone what really mattered. People who had lost their homes were helping others whose losses were even greater. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before the storm became close friends during the recovery. Dr. Patricia Ross had been promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine, partly based on her leadership during the tornado response. She'd also become one of my closest friends, someone who understood the complexities of balancing career and family, of making impossible choices under pressure. You know what I learned from watching you handle the Carol situation? Patricia had asked me recently. What's that? That sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. You could have accepted that your parents had rejected Madison, that your sister had turned them against you. Instead, you investigated, gathered evidence, and fought back strategically. I couldn't let her destroy my family. Most people would have just gotten angry and made the situation worse. You got surgical. That was the right word for it. Surgical. Ed approached Carol's manipulation the same way I approached a complex medical case. Diagnose the problem accurately. Understand all the systems involved. Plan the intervention carefully. Execute precisely. Monitor the results. Adjust as needed. Now, standing in my childhood kitchen, watching my daughter bond with her grandparents while Carol's children played safely in the yard, I reflected on everything we'd been through and everything we'd learned. The most important lesson was about the difference between love and enabling. For 8 months, my parents had been enabling Carol's destructive behavior because they thought that was what love required. They'd sacrificed their own financial security and damaged their relationship with me because Carol had convinced them that love meant accepting her lies and supporting her choices without question. But real love sometimes requires saying no. Real love sets boundaries. Real love protects people from their own worst impulses and refuses to enable destructive behavior. Ed learned that predators often work by isolating their victims from the people who truly love them. They plant seeds of doubt, intercept communications, and gradually poison relationships until their victims believe lies about the people trying to help them. They create an us versus them dynamic where they're the only source of truth and everyone else is the enemy. The most powerful weapon against that kind of manipulation is transparency and direct communication. Carol's scheme fell apart the moment my parents and I started talking honestly with each other, comparing notes, and verifying information independently. It also learned that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes justice looks like protection. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries that prevent future harm. Sometimes it looks like rebuilding what was damaged and making it stronger than before. Carol was serving her time and hopefully learning to make better choices. Her children were safe and thriving. My parents were secure and happy. Madison understood that she was loved unconditionally, and that family meant people who showed up for each other in crisis. Most importantly, Ed learned that family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about the people who choose to love and support each other through difficulties. Patricia and Robert had become family in ways that mattered more than genetics. They'd shown up when we needed them, offered help without being asked, and proven that love is a choice we make every day, not just an accident of birth. As we sat down for dinner that evening, my father offered a prayer of gratitude. We're thankful for this food, for this home, for the second chances we've been given, and for the family that surrounds this table. We're grateful that love has found a way back home. After dinner, as Madison helped clean dishes and my parents settled in to watch a movie with the children, I stepped outside onto the porch where Carol had left Madison standing in the rain 8 months earlier. The memory still made me angry, but it also filled me with gratitude for how far we'd all come. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "How's family dinner going?" I typed back, "Perfect. Chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect. That's the best kind of family." She was right. We weren't perfect. We'd made mistakes, fallen for lies, hurt each other's feelings, and nearly lost everything that mattered. But we'd fought for each other when it counted. We'd chosen love over pride, truth over comfort, and healing over resentment. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for each other when everything falls apart, and working together to rebuild something better than what was broken. That night, as I tucked Madison into bed in her room at my parents' house, she asked me a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Mom, do you think Aunt Carol really loves us?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think Carol loves the idea of us. But love isn't just a feeling, sweetheart. Love is action. Love is choosing to protect and support the people you care about, even when it's hard. Love is being honest even when the truth is uncomfortable. So she loves us, but she doesn't know how to love us well." That's a very wise way to put it. Will she learn how? I hope so. But whether she does or not, you're surrounded by people who already know how to love you well. Grandma and Grandpa, Patricia, Robert, the kids, me, you're safe and loved and protected. I know, Mom. I'm not worried anymore. As I turned off the light and headed to my own childhood bedroom, I smiled at that simple statement of security. Madison wasn't worried anymore because she'd learned that even when some people let you down, there are always other people who won't. She'd learned that love is stronger than manipulation, that truth is more powerful than lies, and that families can survive almost anything if they're willing to fight for each other. I'd learned that when everything falls apart, the most important thing isn't avoiding the crisis. It's choosing how to respond to it. You can be a victim of circumstances, or you can be someone who takes action to protect what matters most. When my family was under attack, I didn't just get angry. I got strategic. I gathered evidence, built alliances, and executed a plan that exposed the truth and protected the innocent. I fought for my daughter, my parents, and the relationships that give life meaning. And in the end, love won. Not because we were perfect, but because we refused to give up on each other. That's the lesson I want you to take from this story. When the people you love are in danger, don't just hope someone else will fix it. Take action. Gather information. Build your case. Fight for what matters. And remember that the strongest families aren't the ones who never face challenges. They're the ones who face challenges together and come out stronger on the other side. Have you ever had to fight for your family against someone who was supposed to protect them? How did you find the courage to take action when everything felt hopeless? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or helped you think differently about family loyalty and boundaries, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal and discovering that love really can conquer all. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, when love shines light on the darkness, it always finds a way back home.